there, it's Kevin with GatheringMagic.com with this week's episode of the Rogues Alley. This week I'm going to be piloting my favorite Frontier deck. I think that right now is a good time to be playing Frontier, with Modern and Standard recently having a ban list, with it not going effective till the 20th, and with a new set coming out, Aether Revolt, which I think is going to spice both of those formats up quite a bit, where Frontier is still new and fresh. As many of you know, I'm one of the more outspoken personalities or commentators or whatever you want to call me for the format. I've played a number of different decks. This is my go-to deck. We had a huge tournament over at Harbinger over the weekend with the Frontier format, and I think it was called the Frontier Gods or God of Frontier, and it had a lot of predictable matchups, a lot of Atarka Red, a lot of Jeskai Black, a lot of these decks that existed in standard seasons of the past. So what I really like, one of the kind of gripes that I hear about Frontier is that Khans Tarkir block is more powerful than the rest of them. And what I really like about this deck is it has a good spread of all of the cards from M15 forward. In fact, one of the M15 cards is one of the most important cards in the deck for the Pyromancer's Goggle to abuse, which is the Lightning Strike. Lightning Strike is Frontier's Lightning Bolt. It's a very versatile card. It can kill many of the different threats from Goblin Rabblemaster all the way over to Soulfire Grandmasters and Jaces. And the 3 damage instant speed to a creature or player is extremely relevant. So it's probably one of the more later game, it becomes 6 damage with the Pyromancer's Goggles. So it's definitely a 4 of. And then from the Khans of Tarkir block, what we get is we get the fetch lands, which some people don't like. I particularly think they're fine, because I think the rest of the mana is just as good. In this deck, I'm using the Bloodstained Mires as a 4 of and the Wooded Foothills as a 2 of, because we want to basically guarantee a red source. Red is the most important color in this deck. The other colors, we have a few black sources in the form of the Kolaghan's Command, and then we have a few white sources with Crackling Doom and Soulfire Grandmaster. But the vast majority of cards are going to be running, in fact, all cards but the Soulfire Grandmaster are going to be running red. So it's important to find a way to either get a basic mountain or to get the Smoldering Marsh. So Bloodstained Mire is going to be our go-to card for that. The other sources in the deck are going to add for red besides the Caves. So Caves and Shambling Vent. And I chose Shambling Vent over Needle Spires just because I think it's more relevant in this type of mid-range, or what you call control deck, to be gaining life rather than doing double strike damage. So Inspiring Vantages are going to add red-white at fast mana. Same with the Battlefield Forge, so we're not going to have to worry about our 1 and 2 drops being able to kill off Jaces. Most likely the deck is either we're going to get a Smoldering Marsh by choice on the battlefield turn 1 and not have to worry about their 1 drop, and then turn 2 have the mana we need to kill off that Jace, or we are going to be able to play an Inspiring Vantage or Battlefield Forge to cast the Wild Slash or the Lightning Strike on time. So this deck, what I like most about it too, is it feels, if you followed the channel for a while, you know that I was a huge fan of Scred Red in Modern. It was kind of a lot of my play style of this deck that can kind of turn the tempo back on your opponent, so you can go from a heavy control-based deck to just a few burn spells away from taking your opponent out. And most of these cards do progressively do damage to your opponent, like the Crackling Doom and the Kolaghan's Command. So from Fate Reforged, which I think is actually the most important piece or set in this, is we have Wild Slash, which is the premier removal spell for the early cards. So it takes care of like a turn 1 problematic card. With goblins, they have the Founder Street Denizen. It also takes care of the Goblin Rabblemaster as well as the Goblin Pile Driver. There are many strategies that you just need to shock off something early to kind of stabilize. We still have decks that run like Toolcraft Exemplar that need to be taken care of before they can swing in for 3 on turn 2. A lot of aggressive Reckless Bushwhacker type decks can be slowed down if you just kill one of their pieces that they're going to pump up. And Soulfire Grandmaster is extremely relevant in this particular deck because it can be a late game finisher, but it usually do not worry about trading with this card early. People will attack him thinking, oh, there's no way he's going to trade with his Soulfire Grandmaster. I will absolutely trade with my Soulfire Grandmaster because in this deck, it is very much a renewable resource through Kolaghan's Command. So speaking of Kolaghan's Command, it's probably the most powerful card in the deck. This card is insanely good against Ensoul Artifact. It's good versus control because you can kill off a Jace and force them to discard a card. It is good versus any other artifact aggro strategies like Smuggler's Copter just get shut down by this card. The best feeling in the world that happened to me against an Ensoul Artifact deck was my opponent tried to hook up an Ornithopter to the Ensoul Artifact to an Ornithopter and also had a Smuggler's Copters out. So I was able to do 2 damage to the Ornithopter on the stack as well as kill the Smuggler's Copter. So 3 cards for 1 card. Just a massive blowout. With the Kolaghan's Command. But what really makes this card shine in the deck is late game, it just gets back a Soulfire Grandmaster or a Goblin Dark-Dweller, and then the Soulfire Grandmaster is one of your finishers late game. So there have been many games where I've been able to Lightning Strike over and over and over, rinse and repeat, or Wild Slash is actually a little bit easier because all you have to have is 5 mana, but 2 damage per turn and gaining 2 life, or taking out a creature per turn and gaining 2 life is extremely good in this kind of grindy format with Jeskai Black and Jeskai aggro type strategies that are just going to try to outvalue you. So Crackling Doom is another amazing card. It's very good versus Aetherix Marvel because it's a way to kill an Emrakul. It also just scales well. You're going to kill their biggest threat every time. And so things that you can pick off their weaker threats with Wild Slashes and Lightning Strikes. Sometimes you have to worry about those Tassigurs and those Grim Anglers and the Dragonlord Ojatais and the Kolaghan the Storm's Fury. Crackling Doom is the go-to card for taking care of those threats. It's great for killing Thunderbreak Regents, for example, without taking damage. And just a extremely good card. So that's one of the cards we pick up from cons. What I like about this kind of spread throughout the Ages of Frontier is some of our very important cards are recent cards from both Kalitas and from the Shadows of Innistrad, which Nahiri was a recent addition to this deck. I've had a lot of success being able to kill enchantments. There are some pesky enchantments like Always Watchings every now and again that Nahiri is just such a flexible card. If not, it can be a threat. Getting back a Goblin Dark-Dwellers or searching for Goblin Dark-Dwellers, even though we're a very creature-light deck, is enough of an upside to tick this up. But mainly it's just going to get rid of a creature, then it's going to tick back up. A lot of times you get like 3 cards out of Nahiri, or this just becomes, people ignore you and swing into Nahiri a lot of times, and they have to do 6 damage to Nahiri, and that is huge with a deck that needs to stabilize and eventually find its control pieces. Chandra is the same thing. Chandra is my finisher quite often because we are controlling the board very well. Kolaghan's Command, Crackling Doom, Wild Slash, Lightning Strike, and it's just a few turns away to ulting, and once you get this card ulted, it's easy just to... A Lightning Strike now does 8 damage, a Wild Slash now does 7 damage, a Crackling Doom does 7 damage, and it's huge for finishing. It's very hard for a deck to beat a Chandra ult. The 5-drop slot is a little bit crowded, but it's very necessary. The Goblin Dark-Dwellers interacts with every one of your early cards. From the Crackling Dooms to the Kolaghan's Command, even to a Wild Slash or a Lightning Strike, it's going to get value. It's going to come down late. It's going to give you a 4/4 body. If you've done damage, this is what I like about this particular deck, is you can go from being the control deck to then just being the aggressive deck. And when it comes down to top deck mode, you've gotten rid of all of your opponent's cards at the cost of using your cards. This is just insane value, having Menace needing to be blocked by 2 creatures and getting a spell back from your graveyard for another cast. Kolaghan's Command is just perfect with this card because it often gets back either another Goblin Dark-Dwellers or a Soulfire Grandmaster, and then you feel very far ahead. Pyromancer's Goggles might not need to be a 3 of. It was a 4 of in this deck. I mean, it's the namesake for the deck, but it just interacts very well with every card in the deck. The Crackling Dooms become doubled. The Kolaghan's Command become doubled. This one was pretty great versus a matchup that I had versus Esper Dragons. I was able to copy a Kolaghan's Command, returning 2 Goblin Dark-Dwellers and making my opponent discard 2 cards. And so with Esper Dragons, it's a very grindy matchup. There's Dig Through Times, there's Treasure Cruises. There's a lot of ways that they try to get card advantage, even Ojutai's Command, and basically getting 4 cards for 1 off the Pyromancer's Goggles was and then the Goblin Dark-Dwellers, then being able to cast the Kolaghan's Command again that I used was just backbreaking. In that particular matchup, I was able to fight through 3 dig through times and still win the game. Like I said, these become very, very grindy. This deck does very well against aggro, mid-range, and control, and just feels like to be the complete package in the format. I do have a one of Crater's Claw. This has actually been a bit underwhelming in the format. I might just replace it for another Incendiary Flow, but the idea was late game, if you have a Goblin Dark-Dwellers and a Pyromancer's Goggles, this can just finish off the game by itself, because it will get Ferocious, so it's going to add 2 for that first mana, and say you have 6 mana, or Pyromancer's Goggles, you have 5 mana for Pyromancer's Goggles, and the 6 that the Pyromancer's Goggles can activate, that's a 7 damage that then becomes copied, because it's and that's huge. That's 14 damage to the face that you can do towards your opponents. What I like about being in these colors too is it gives you the really, really, really good effective sideboard strategies versus many of the matchups in the meta at the moment. So there are a lot of Rally and Coco decks. Hallowed Moonlight is incredibly good at shutting those down. I have another Incendiary Flow because this is a card that can just exile so Jace-based decks actually want to get Jace back eventually. That's if you Incendiary Flow it, it's gone. Don't have to worry about it. Zulaport Cutthroat's gone. If they don't have a way to protect it with an Nantuko Husk yet, it's completely eradicated, and it can be hard for those type of decks to actually win without multiple Zulaport Cutthroats. The Authority of the Consuls is great for shutting down a Tarka Red or any other haste type deck or go wide strategy. This makes their Hordeling Outburst gain you 3 life and then come into play tap. So if they have ways to give them haste, they're coming in play tap, which also in the rare circumstances where you turn in the aggressor, it actually works quite well with Soulfire Grandmaster with the cards coming into play tap, and then you get in for the 2 lifelink damage, and a lot of times you're not going to be blocking what they're attacking in with, because the Soulfire just has a lot more value staying alive than Authority Consuls just does wonders. I only like as a one of, though. I don't really like multiples. Another card that's super good against the tokens-based strategies, a Tarka Red especially, is Virulent Plague. When they run 8 cards that generate tokens, and then to an extent you can also put Goblin Rabblemaster in that category, Virulent Plague just has really good value. This shuts down Gideon tokens, it shuts down Hangerback Walker tokens. Sometimes I don't bring them in specifically for Hangerback Walker, but if I know that my opponent is going to have some sort of token-based strategy, Virulent Plague is going to come in, and just as a one-of, you don't want multiples. It's backbreaking for a Tarka Red to deal with this if they're the go-wide strategy. Speaking of like a Tarka Red or faster-based decks, we have Radiant Flames. Radiant Flames is hilarious with Soulfire Grandmaster because it gains a ton of life, because it deals a ton of damage throughout the board. I have a one of Collective Defiance. This is a card I don't know how I feel about. It's really good when you copy it. It's also another option for the Goblin Dark-Dwellers to target, but I think that we're fine with this like burn strategy. I don't know if it's actually necessary in the deck. Anguished Unmaking is another card that is just a nice little flex slot. It's kind of like my third Nahiri. You can exile basically any problematic card in the format, and losing 3 life isn't bad with ways to gain life through the Soulfire Grandmaster and the Shambling Vents. We have the 2 of Kalitas. Kalitas is still very good against the rally decks, the Coco decks, because it exiles the cards. They're gone forever. They have to have a way to deal with Kalitas, and a lot of times we're setting it up before we actually cast it. It's something that's kind of a renewable resource again with the Kolaghan's commands, and it's just a very solid card. You bring this in versus a Tarka Red, you bring this in versus any aggro-based strategy, turns your Wild Slashes into also generating 2/2 tokens, and then you can sack a token. Usually if you were able to put 2+1/+1 counters on it, it puts it out of the range of roast, and then you're gaining 5 life every time it deals combat damage, which is just backbreaking. And then the super secret deck tech, which is what you bring in versus control, Commune with Lava. This is so great even if you cast it for just 5, the 3 cards that you can get, you have an entire turn to play them. And it's sometimes you'll hit a land, you can play that land drop if you main phase this, you can play a land on your turn if you missed a land drop, and then if you hit another land with the Commune, then your next turn you can play another one, because you have until the end of your next turn to cast all the cards with Commune. It's really, really good off Pyromancer's Goggles. Yes, I was able to copy a Commune on 7, I believe, so I was able to draw 10 cards, 2 Communes, and was able to cast almost all of them because I also had a Chandra out, and then generate just enough mana just to cast all the cards, hit 2 land drops. Really, really good card against the dig through time-based decks. So that's a huge overview. I know this is more of a longer deck tech, but I think this deck requires a lot of explanation. It's the one I've had the most successes last Saturday in the 2-man queues, or in the what we do in the freeform channel. I faced off against 8 unique decks and went 8-0 with this deck. So that just shows you the power level of the deck. You played decks from anywhere from a Tarka Red to Ensoul Artifact to the Teamer Flash decks to the Esper Dragons to the Jeskai Blacks to the Rally of the Ancestors to Elves, Elves was the easiest matchup in the world. Panharmonica is terrible versus the Kolaghan's Command. A lot of the cards are just bad versus this particular strategy. So I felt like I got a full range of what the Frontier meta has to offer, and this deck just did phenomenal. So we'll try to repeat that and get some matchups going. This has been Kevin with GatheringMagic.com. Thanks for watching.